Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. Welcome to our evening with Richard Wagamese, celebrating the 2013-14 MacEwan Book of the Year, Indian Horse. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the diverse Indigenous peoples on which we are gathered today, the Cree, the Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux. And I would now like to invite Mr. Jerry Wood, who's the elder in residence here at MacEwan University, to offer a prayer as we begin tonight's event. Thank you, Jerry.
Tansinto temtek. Mioteo no skakio tatamskat now. My relatives, I greet you with a glad heart and very honored to have been offered tobacco to say the opening prayer, because tobacco is one of our 4 sacred medicines. Tobacco wasn't used for recreational purposes like we would like today. It's one of our 4 medicines: tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. And I'm very honored to come and say the opening prayer for tonight, and because we're going to have a very fun event. And when I read the book Indian Horse, I said to myself, you know, this Richard Wagamese, he wrote my story, and I've never met him, you know, because I spent 11 years in residential school, and you know, I won't go into detail for some of you that you know, haven't read the book, you know, so you know what a lot of us experienced in residential school. So you'll be sitting for an hour or so I'll ask you to stand up so we can move a little bit, and ask you to pray along with me, you know, in the way you normally do. Mamoy no tawin han soim na no mota kawas kakapawi ako mota ego payon minagami ako ni sogot Richard tak ego minagawi mio paichigo ako maganuwa. Creator, we thank you for this beautiful day that you have given us, and for blessing us for the 2 Richards that we have here tonight, 2 great authors, and we ask that you shower your blessings upon them and all the ones who have come to listen, and their families too, and give everybody good health and happiness, and a safe journey back home. Hi, hi.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much, Jerry. So my name is Paul Martin, and I'm going to be emceeing our event for this evening. And here's how tonight's event is going to go. After some introductions, Richard Wagamese is going to read for us, and we'll follow that with an onstage interview with Richard Van Camp. For those of you who were at last year's event with Michael Ondaatje, you'll remember we had a Michael interviewing a Michael, and tonight we have Richard interviewing Richard. Next year we have Patrick DeWitt. I'm looking for if there's anyone named Patrick in the audience. We're looking for an interviewer. And so after they speak, we'll have some time for questions. There's microphones for the audience. And afterwards, both Richards will be available to sign books, and there are books for sale, courtesy of the MacEwan University bookstore. As Faculty Development Coordinator at MacEwan University in the Center for the Advancement of Faculty Excellence, I have the privilege of working alongside many remarkable people. And some of my favorites are the members of our remarkable MacEwan Book of the Year committee. We have over a dozen members of our committee, and it's through their efforts that the full range of our MacEwan Book of the Year events are able to happen so smoothly. I can't thank them all individually. This is over 12 of them. But I did want to single out a couple of people for special thanks. Most notably, Sharon McLean from the bookstore, Jody Nelson from the library, Carrie Precht from Arts and Science, and most important, Shelley Josie from Faculty Development and Cafe, without whom tonight's event would not be so successful. I'd also like to thank the MacEwan Book of the Year's key sponsors, the Faculty Development Program, the MacEwan University Bookstore, Department of English, the Student Association of MacEwan University, the Aboriginal Education Centre, and our wonderful partners at the Edmonton Public Library. With the rescheduling of our event from the 2013-14 Book of the Year to tonight, we're actually going to be holding two major events this year. This coming March, we'll be welcoming Patrick DeWitt, the author of The Sisters Brothers, which is the MacEwan Book of the Year for 2014-15. And I'd like to take a moment right now to invite you all to come back, to return in the spring, to join us in celebrating another fine Canadian novel. Now in its 19th year, the MacEwan Book of the Year celebrates an outstanding work of Canadian fiction published within the last 5 years. Over the course of the academic year, students read the MacEwan Book of the Year in English courses and in other courses in connected disciplines. And then typically during a full week in March, the author of the book comes to campus where he or she visits classes, delivers a large public reading like tonight. And we have other events, including a workshop with aspiring writers on campus, an unveiling of the plaque on our MacEwan Book Wall of Fame in the library, which we did this afternoon. And it's an important event on campus. And the MacEwan Book of the Year is also continuing to gain national attention, really is the only program of its kind in Canada. And this past year, we had over 600 students in disciplines ranging from English to art and design, reading Indian Horse. And they did critical and creative assignments based on the novel. We also held a faculty panel discussion about the book. We had a connected film series and a really remarkable student contest where we had hundreds of students submitting essays and creative works connected to Richard's novel, Indian Horse. Now, unfortunately, Richard was forced to cancel his visit earlier in the year due to a serious infection in his hand, from which we're all really glad to know that he's fully recovered. And we are really especially excited that he's been able to reschedule his visit to MacEwan and to give the campus and community another opportunity to celebrate his remarkable novel, Indian Horse, and also to hear from his most recent novel, Medicine Walk. Richard Wagamese is one of Canada's foremost Native authors and journalists. An Ojibwe from the Wagamese First Nation in northwestern Ontario, Richard's career spans over 30 years and includes work in newspapers, radios, and television. He's published 13 books, including Keeper and Me in 1994, Dream Wheels in 2007, One Native Life in 2008, Indian Horse in 2012, and Medicine Walk in 2014. He's the recipient of numerous awards for his writing, including a National Newspaper Award for column writing, the George Riga Award for Social Awareness and Literature in 2011 for his memoir, One Story, One Song, the Canadian Authors Association Award for Fiction for his third novel, Dream Wheels, and the Alberta Writers Guild Best Novel Award for his debut novel, Keeper and Me. His novel, Indian Horse, was a Canada Reads finalist in 2013, the MacEwan Book of the Year, of course, in 2013-14, and was the inaugural winner of the really remarkable Burt Award for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Literature. Richard was also the 2012 recipient of the National Aboriginal Achievement Award for Media and Communications, the 2013 recipient of the Canada Council on the Arts Molson Prize, and has been awarded honorary doctorates by Thompson Rivers University in 2010 and Lakehead University in 2014. Richard's work is remarkable, both in its literary achievement and in the powerful impact it has had on readers from all backgrounds from coast to coast to coast. In the 20 years since the publication of his first novel, Keeper and Me, Richard has become one of our country's most important authors. His novels allow us to walk alongside characters who suffer everything from the impact of the residential schools and the violent severing of connections to place and family, to homelessness, alcoholism, racism, and sexual abuse. But in his characters' unforgettable journeys to connect with family, culture, and the deep power of the land, Richard also offers us a world marked by friendship, redemption, compassion, and grace. Tonight, Richard's going to read for us from both Indian Horse and Medicine Walk, which was published earlier this year to rave reviews. These two remarkable novels find Richard Wagamese at the top of his game and have connected with readers from across the country. We're absolutely delighted to have Richard join us here tonight. Please join me in offering a warm MacEwan University welcome to Mr. Richard Wagamese. There we go. good here. Good? Good. All right.
Good evening. That's your cue. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this incredible honor. I spoke this afternoon and I said what a privilege and an honor it was to have Indian Horse join the Wall of Fame with books that I've largely read all of them, and that represent watershed marks in Canadian literature, and to have Indian Horse among them is a really, really amazing thing. I have difficulty actually finding words for it, but it's a significant honor, and I thank MacEwan University and all of you for making Indian Horse the success that it has become and continues to be. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. It wasn't supposed to be this book. It was supposed to be Shoeless Joe Does Hockey. It was supposed to be a magic realist adventure wherein Saul Indian Horse, the hockey phenomenon, meets Vladislav Tretiak, the goalie phenomenon from the Soviet Union, and Tretiak challenges Saul to a 13-puck shootout to find out who is the greatest hockey phenomenon of all time. And I was happy writing that. It was really, really great. It was just sailing along, and I thought, this is going to be amazing. And I thought of the tagline from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And I thought, the tagline for this novel could be, if you chilled it, they will come. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. But the strange thing about fiction sometimes is that your characters develop a mind and a spirit of their own. And Saul said to me one day, hey, Richard, there's a bigger story here. And I said, what? He said, there's a bigger story here. And so I had to listen to him. And he said, you need to talk more about what happened to me in residential school. And I mean, when your protagonist steps up and says, this is what you have to do, you really need to listen. So I did. I walked around for a couple of days and I thought about what Saul wanted out of this story, and there was indeed a bigger and better story, and so the novel became the novel that it did. And what it is a novel about residential school, about redemption, about recovery, and about hope in the end. That all of those things might meld together into one galvanized energy that can transcend all of the hurt, all of the bitterness, all of the anger, all of the angst, and take all of us as Canadian brothers and sisters to a better understanding, a better place together. And the overriding question since the novel came out, everywhere I've been, has been, what did Native people really lose, Richard? What did Native people really lose? And the answer is in the novel. And you know, I puzzled over that question for a while. And when it came time to write that section that delineated exactly what Native people lost, I could have went way over the moon with it. I could have become political, I could have become rhetorical, I could have become bitter, I could have become all kinds of things. But I found a way through that. I found a way past that. And the passage that talks about that is one of the shortest ones in the book. But I'm sure you'll see, if you haven't read it yet, you'll see in this reading what they lost. If you're reading along, it's page 53. One afternoon during some rare unsupervised time, a dozen of us escaped to the bottom of the ridge the school sat on. A small creek ran along the base of the ridge, curving up out of an inkpot lake and into a larger one. The creek was narrow, maybe 3 feet across, and shallow. It was a sucker creek. The fish swam up at the spawn in the bigger water, and we went down there with burlap bags we'd taken from the barns. We could see the fish pushing up that water. It was thrilling. So much life, so much desperation, so much energy. We stood for a long time and just watched. Then some of us cut saplings and bent them around the inside lip of those sacks. We lowered them into the water and pulled them up dripping and filled with fish. We watched the silvery brown flash as they flopped out onto the bank, their puckered mouths flapping like wet kisses from fat aunties, their tails flipping and slapping against the ground. We pushed them back into the water and pulled up another sack. We did that 4 times. The 4th time we stood quietly, each of us lost in our thoughts as the fish struggled for air, for life, for freedom. When we bent finally and took the fish in our hands to set them back into the water, most of us were crying. We turned as a group and began the long sloping walk back up the ridge to the school. We walked with our hands cupped around our noses, breathing in the smell of those fish, pushing the slime of them around on our faces. We had no knives to clean them, to flay them. We had no fire to smoke them over. We had no place to store them, no way to keep them. When they lay gasping on the grass, it was ourselves we saw fighting for air. We were Indian kids, and all we had was the smell of those fish on our hands. We fell asleep that night with our noses pressed to our hands, and as the days went by and the smell of those suckers faded, there wasn't a one of us that didn't cry for the loss of the life we'd known before. When the dozen of us cried in the chapel, the nuns smiled, believing it was the promise of their God that touched us. But we all walked out of there with our hands to our faces, breathing in, breathing in. And in that passage, I answered that question. What did they really lose? And if you heard it, you know exactly what it is that they lost. So Saul was dumped into residential school after having watched the last vestige of his traditional life fall to pieces all around him, disappear forever in the frozen clutch to the bosom of his grandmother. And he wound up in St. Jerome's residential school and became a denizen of that dark and shrouded world, and might have languished there and maybe disappeared, except for the game. When someone brought hockey to St. Jerome's residential school, they offered him an avenue to redemption and an avenue to a joy that was previously unknown to him. And he began to clean the rink because he was too small to play the game. The game was saved for larger, bigger boys. But he wanted to be close to it because he could see such abandon, such joy, and such freedom in it that he wanted to be close to it, so he volunteered to clean the ice. But as you know, if you've read the book, he started to stash hockey equipment in the snowbank. And he'd pull it out after the ice was cleared, and he'd taught himself to stick handle using frozen horse turds. Just fell in love with the game. And here's an example of the joy that he found and the release and the freedom and the abandon he found in that game of hockey. At night in the dormitory, when all the other boys were asleep, I would get out of bed and stand in the aisle between the rows of cots where the moonlight made the linoleum look like ice and mimicked the motion of stick handling. I pictured myself barreling across the blue line with the puck tucked neatly on the blade of my stick. I would throw a broad feint at the final defender and race in alone toward the goalie, who would begin to retreat slowly into the crease. I would shift my weight from foot to foot as I skated, dancing, wriggling, faking, the puck still nestled in the cradle of my blade. The space between the goalie and me would shrink, and when I got about 10 feet away, I would draw the puck back behind my right leg. Then I would drive my weight forward onto my left leg and allow the momentum to bring the stick and puck forward. When the weight transfer was right, I'd snap my wrists and send the puck in a blur high into the right-hand corner, bulging the twine behind the helpless goaltender. Naturally, the force of my shot would take me to one knee. I would raise my arms in the hushed light of the dorm. My mouth would be open with glee, and I would face the picture of Jesus hung there on the wall, my salvation coming instead through wood and rubber and ice and the dream of a game. I'd stand there, arms held high in triumph, and I would not feel lonely or afraid, deserted or abandoned, but connected to something far bigger than myself. Then I'd climb back into bed and sleep until the dawn woke me and I could walk back out to the rink again. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was one of those kids who found rough patches of ice wherever I could. And I would go out there alone after dark when there was no lights, and I'd teach myself how to stick candle in the darkness, learning how to move it by feel because I couldn't look down and actually see it. And there's something that happens in the course of doing that where you instantly get transported so that you go beyond time and you go beyond circumstance. And there's just you and the motion and the spirit of the game that you're playing, and it becomes like you're inventing it. Every move that you make, every little shift on your feet when you're skating, feels like nobody has ever done that before in the history of the planet. And you fall head over heels, puppy dog-eyed, in love with that game. And that's what happens to Saul. But the unfortunate thing is that he uses that sense of abandon to avoid looking at the deeper issue, the deeper question of his experience in the residential school. But life happens, and life asks him at a certain juncture to turn back and look at what happened. And he eventually does, and he remembers that the priest that everybody thought that was going to allow him to find that freedom and skate with it wasn't quite the hero that it was suggested that he was. And it becomes desperate. And the funny thing about that I spoke about this afternoon is that I knew that I had the bomb in my hand. And I would go to my desk every morning and I'd start writing and I'd think, is this the day? And I'd write and I'd write and I'd write and I'd think, is this the reveal? And I'd go, nope, not today. And I'd write and I'd write and I'd write and I'd come back the next day and I'd go, this is the day I dropped the bomb. This is the day the big reveal happens. And I'd write and I'd write and I'd write and I'd go, nope, not today. And I wasn't really sure when it was going to fall. I knew that it had to. And then one day I just sat down and it was there and it fell and it was in a perfect place. And people have commented on the fact that that reveal was hinted at, but they didn't really expect it. So he has to find a way to heal himself, because that's the journey that we're all on when we're wounded. And at the end of the book, he goes back to the only family that he was ever able to find out of the residential school. He goes back to Manitowaj, to the last vestiges of the Manitowaj moose, and he decides that he's going to settle there. And when he comes back, everybody's happy to see him, and they all go down to the arena to skate, to play hockey. And I just want to read this end piece because it's the central metaphor of the whole story. Best way to choose up sides is the old-fashioned way, Stu Little Chief said with a nod to me. Do the honors, Saul. Sure, I said. Everyone dropped their sticks in the center ice circle. I skated in and began pushing sticks toward each blue line. When they were all cleared from the center, the teams were set. Virgil was on the opposite team. He skated to the face-off circle. I met him there. At least 18 of us were on the ice. How are we going to do this? I asked. Got to hit the post to call it a goal. No raising the puck. No, I mean, with all these people, how are we going to play the game? He smiled and tapped my stick with his. Together, he said, like we should have all along. And I smiled. He won that face-off, but I didn't care. And that's the note it ends on, because you know what? The legacy of residential schools isn't just an Aboriginal issue. It's a deep psychic wound on Canada. And so if we're going to move toward reconciliation, it's not just the brown people in our midst that have to work toward that. It's all of us. And I think if there's one reaction that First Nations and Aboriginal people have worked towards through everything over all of these years, it's not so that people feel guilty about something that happened in their grandfather's time. It's not that people feel contrite and sad because all of this had to happen. It's so that people will accept the whole flow of the story, not just the good parts of Canada, but the sad, darker, bruising, wounding parts. Native people have pushed for this because they want one reaction from all of those people, all of their Canadian neighbors, to be able to say one word: yes. Yes, it happened. Yes, people were hurt. Yes, it hurts me to know that my neighbors were hurt. Yes, It means that there's things that we have to do. Yes, we can do it. And yes, we have a strong enough vision about the nature and the scope and the resiliency of the country to do it together like we should have all along. That's what this book is about, and that's what First Nations rights issues and every movement forward is all about. A collective yes. Let's change it together. Thank you.
Maybe we'll end, yeah. Okay, I got a plan.
A plan.
Oh, yes. Oh. Richard Wagamese, ladies and gentlemen, give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
Ho, 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 ho. Now,
Wow.
I know there's people, I'm nervous now, Paul, because people are sitting in the back and they can't see us. What are we going to do? I don't want people to, I don't want people to miss out. Look, I got people craning. Can you guys see me now? Can you guys see Richard Wagamese? No, they can't.
We can stand up and do this part.
We can stand up. Okay, we're going to do the big stand because we don't want to. Give yourselves a round of applause.
All right.
We're together. We're safe. We're warm. Yay. Welcome back to Treaty 6 country.
Thank you.
Hey, I got you a
Great
gift.
to be here.
I got you a gift.
Oh, wow.
So you'll notice this is a Gravity Pope bag. Actually, I didn't get you new shoes, but you got to open it up.
It's a bag of chips.
So while he's opening up his gifts, I noticed that Richard Wagamese is in the prime of his life, and he's a jogger. He's discovered yoga, meditation. So I got you some hippie chips, because those are my favorite.
Cool.
I got you some coconut water, because you got to hydrate, baby.
Cool.
Yes.
Coconut water, yes.
And
Smoothies galore.
there's something else in there at the very bottom. You got to check it out. Edmonton, everybody who loves Edmonton will know what I'm about to give this man. Okay, Planet Organic. How many of you are addicted to the cosmic cookies? Yay, give them a round of applause. Okay, because, 2 hours from now, you're going to be back in your room, and you say, I'm starving. What's going on here? And then you're going to have nutrition. So that's for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, my friend.
Okay, my pleasure. So, Paul Martin, you have something to say?
Well, I was going to introduce you.
Oh, okay. I'll sit down. I'm a humble man. I'll sit.
All right. I can see where this is all going already, but let me just take a second to introduce our friend Richard Van Camp. And Richard Van Camp is a proud member of the Dog Rib Nation. He's from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. He's a graduate of the Anokan International School of Writing, the University of Victoria's Creative Writing BFA program, and the Masters in Creative Writing program at UBC. He's an internationally renowned storyteller and best-selling author. And his work spans multiple genres. His groundbreaking first novel, The Lesser Blessed, which I would argue is one of the most important Canadian novels of the 1990s, continues to be widely read and taught and was recently made into a remarkable film that premiered in 2012 at the Toronto International Film Festival. How many of you have seen that movie? Awesome. Okay. You should absolutely see it if you have not seen it yet. He's the author of 3 short story collections, Angel Wing Splash Pattern, The Moon of Letting Go, and Godless But Loyal to Heaven, which my students in English 282, if there's anyone here, just finished reading. It's a phenomenal book. As well as 2 children's books with Cree artist George Littlechild, A Man Called Raven, and What's the Most Beautiful Thing You Know About Horses. He's also the author of 3 baby books, 2 comic books, and many other short stories, poems, and novellas that have been widely anthologized. And if you've had a chance to meet either of the Richards here with us tonight, which you already have, you'll know that both are wonderful storytellers and occasionally, perhaps more than occasionally, mischief makers. I couldn't resist the opportunity to bring the 2 of them together and to give them free rein on our stage. So I know that we're all really looking forward to listening in on what I'm sure is going to be what already has been an interesting and highly unscripted conversation. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Richard Van Camp.
Thank you. Thank you. The Wagamese. Merci. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
I just want everyone to be able to see. I'm a Virgo. I worry. I'm the oldest of 4. Okay, Mr. Wagamese, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Now, last night I asked Richard, we went out for supper, I said, would you like me to give you some questions now so you have tonight to think about it, and tomorrow you can think about it? He said, no, Absolutely not. I forbid it. He said, there's nothing worse than scripted questions. So have at her. I want anything and everything. So what we're going to do is I have about 8 questions I want to ask Mr. Wagamese, and then we have open mics, and often the best questions come from the fans. So if you have a question for Mr. Wagamese, this is your chance. So number 1, are you ready?
Yes,
Okay.
let's go.
Little story first. I want to open up with a story. So a long time ago, my car broke down. Nothing new. And I am being driven to the Mazda dealership, and I told you this story last night, I want to share it again. And I thought that they would come just to get me, but there were 7 other people in this little van, right? It's this shuttle, right? And then we do the big milk run all around Edmonton and Leduc, and my goodness, Saskatoon, I think we stopped. 18 hours later, and so I start talking with the driver, and he's a great man, his name's Les, and he knows me, my car's always breaking down. So I'm like, Les, it's good to see you, what's new? And this guy in the back goes, hey. I know that voice. I know you. You're on Sheila Rogers. I said, well, yes, I was. He goes, hey, what's your name? I said, it's Richard. And he goes, hey, my wife is your biggest fan. You know what? She had me read passages from your latest book each night to her before we went to bed. I got to thank you. Man, that stuff, wow. There's stuff that you're doing with the human language. I'm not much of a reader, but that stuff is poetry. It's absolutely beautiful. And I really want to thank you. And I said, well, thank you. Thank you, sir. And he goes, seriously, Indian Horse is, what you've done, and Keeper and Me, and Dream Wheels, and Equality. I think we conceived our baby to equality of life. I gotta thank you. So I say this with humility. I'm a humble man. So, sir, what you do with the written word is pure poetry, and I want to share that with you. So the first time, Richard, you and I spoke was 20 years ago.
Yes,
You were writing for North of 60.
I was.
You were one of their writers.
Yes.
And I was about to enter the realm of Braid Creek, Alberta, where they shot North of 60. Did you enjoy writing in a screenplay environment where there were 8 professional writers working on every single script? Because my experience for the month that I was there was you had to fight for every line because the producers were writing, sometimes the directors were writing, the actors were allowed to come in and yell at the writers. There was Hart Hansen, Jordan Wheeler, who else was writing at that time?
Stacey Kaser.
Yeah, Stacey Kaser. Yeah.
Moi.
Yeah.
Dave
Yes, of course. So did you enjoy it, or was it hell on earth?
It was hell on earth, but I loved it.
Did you?
Because it taught me how to clarify my ideas. I would have a vision about what I wanted the story to be like, where I wanted the characters to move, and I would have to bring those in to story meetings, at which point everybody rebutted and said, no, we wouldn't say that in this particular situation, and I would have to defend that idea. So it actually taught me how to clarify my ideas, how to bring them sharply into focus quicker so that I didn't waste a lot of time beating around the proverbial bush. I just got right to the bone of it and I was able to say what needed to be said. And that really went a long way into helping me in writing novels. So I think that it was one of the bridge steps toward becoming the novelist that I eventually became.
Well put, well put. I was working on The Lesser Blessed at that time. Were you there when Thomas King ended up writing an episode for North of 60? He wrote one called Trap Lines. Was that during your time?
No, I think that was just before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to take a moment because, as we all know, Thomas King just won the Governor General's Award for the new novel, On the Turtle's Back. So Thomas King, when I first discovered Aboriginal literature, it was Thomas King and Richard Wagamese. I was reading you at the same time, and I want to say a huge must-see show because you welcomed me into communities, into situations, into people, into personas that I knew. As our elder said, you were writing about me. This was my story, and I didn't know you. So I just wanted to raise my hands. Did Thomas King ever go out of his way for you? Did he ever toss you a bone when you were first starting out? Because he tossed a bone to me, and I want to talk about that after I hear from you.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the process, and we talked a lot about what we thought about stories. And you all heard about what Thomas thought about stories later on, a number of years down the line. And you're still hearing about what I think about stories as each one of my novels comes out. And what he was able to give me then was a vision beyond the page. To understand that the nature and the power of a story is the underlying emotion and the spirit of the words on the paper that brings people in rather than keeps them at a distance. And that really clarified my process for me as a novelist.
Fantastic.
incredible,
You got to give thanks for our trailbreakers. A long time ago, I lived in Fort Smith. I just finished writing for North of 60. I had a little trailer, a little 14 by 68, and Thomas King called me. And he said, Richard Van Camp, I believe in you. And I was like, hello, who is this? And he says, Thomas King. And listen, I just recommended you as you're an emerging writer. There's something called the Festival of Fiction. You got 6 weeks. We're going to pay you $500. In those days, wow, that was it. That was a brand new truck. I'm telling you. And he said, no, don't blow it. You got 6 weeks. Give us your greatest short story. You got to start from scratch. And, I believe in you. And then Ben Cardinal's going to narrate your short story. So if it wasn't for Thomas King, I never would have written Mermaids. And I'm so grateful to him, and I'm proud of him. I mean, he's 71 years old, 12 years since his last novel, and he won the GG today. So I think we're making history. It's our time. It's our time.
are.
Okay, I want to ask you a question. Thank you. How many publishers do you have?
3.
3? 3. I have 10. Have you noticed, it's not a race, Have you noticed that, are your publishers as terrified as I am right now with what's happening in the world economy? People aren't necessarily buying hardcovers anymore. The shipping on a $32 hardcover is almost $32 when you ship it north. Have you noticed a climate of fear, or are your publishers just everything's tickety-boo, carry on?
I think the prevailing attitude is that everybody believes in books. Everybody believes in the whole tactile sensation of holding a book in your hands. The smell of the paper, the smell of the glue, the scent of all that, that's what attracts us to the body of a book, is all of those things. And the sound of the pages crinkling when you turn it. That's what brings us back, and that's what sends us to stores. And I think that, if anything, they're not afraid, they're concerned about the influx of outside influences, but they really believe that you and I, as book lovers, will always go to those physical things that touch us at extremely all kinds of diverse levels. And they believe, as I believe, that that will never die. That's one of the traditions in our reality that's never going to go anywhere, economy or no economy, because we just love the sensation of holding a book in our hands and falling asleep with it on our chest and drooling on it while we sleep.
Taking it to the bath, reading it on a plane. Okay, let's talk process. How does it work for you? Do you have publishers calling you? Because I know you have 2 books out with Orca. Did Orca call you and say, listen, we've got this new series. Can you please write about residential schools? Can you please write about gambling? Can you please... How does it work? Is it a character that inspires you and you don't worry about the publisher? Or do you have publishers writing you? Or do you have an agent that says, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is what I think we should do. How does it work now for you?
Now I have to tell you a story.
Okay. I'm going to sit.
A number of years ago, a guy called me from San Diego, out of the blue, and he said, I have this story that I can't write. How much would you charge me to ghostwrite it for me? And I didn't have a project on the go at the time, so I quoted him a fee, and he said, oh, that's fair. So he sent me his pages, and he had about 210 of them, and they were a mess.
Wow.
And so I took that 210 and I broke it down, and I created a whole different element, a whole different feel to the story, and I ghostwrit it? Yeah, I'm a writer, you know.
That's how you say it, yeah.
I'm more better now than I was then. So I wrote it for him, and I chopped it all down. It was really, really elemental. Not anything like what I would do with the story. I just chopped it down to very, very simplistic blocks and sent it back to him. He published it. And you know what? That dang book won the gold medal at the International Publishers Award in New York City.
See how good you are? See how good you are?
Gold medal. And I thought, well, if I can break down the elements of a story like that and write a pot boiler that has no redeeming social value whatsoever and is going to sell 1 million copies, why don't I just do that instead of slaving to the bone every day and making peanuts? And I was milling that over when suddenly Orca phoned me and said, hey, how would you like to write a book for our Rapids Read series? What we need you to do is we need you to write 18,000 words, 18 chapters, 1,000 words each. Don't worry about plot. Don't worry about character development. Don't worry about narrative arc. Just write action, action, action. And I thought, he's talking about television. And I'd already had that experience, so I wrote him the next sure thing. about a boy who's trying to be a blues musician and gets sucked into the world of the mafia. And I finished it in like 3 weeks. And it was fabulous. And I thought, this is cool. And I thought, I'd like to do that again. So they phoned me about a year and a half later and said, would you do another one? And I remembered that experience. And I thought, I can knock that off in no time. And I did. I wrote Him Standing. And so they always seem to be finding me.
Okay.
And it always seems to be at opportune times when I seem to have some kind of experience that lends itself to their suggestions.
Okay, Musty Cho, thank you. So I'm a huge fan. It's been 20 years of reading your work. So this is for me. This is strictly for me. Nobody else here is going to think of this question. With the multiple characters you've written about, are there any chances of us revisiting them in the future? I'm thinking of One for the Dead and Ragged Company, for example, or Joe Willie Wolfchild and Dream Wheels, or Saul Indian Horse. Are we ever going to see them again in any future projects?
Yes.
Oh, yay!
The novel that's on my desk right now, that's on my computer, in my keyboard, coming out of the curls of my knuckles right now, is the sequel to Medicine Walk.
Oh, good.
And so Franklin Starlight lives. And it's Frank's story in the sequel, which is called Starlight. And it's just an extension of the story that got left off at the end of Medicine Walk. And people have been bugging me for a long, long time to do a sequel to Keeper and Me. And so I'm hatching that as days go by, and I think probably once this sequel to Medicine Walk is finished, that I'm actually going to do a sequel 20 years later to my first novel, Keeper and Me.
Great. Well, that's wonderful news. So what about Ragged Company?
Not so much.
Not so much.
Not so much. No.
Okay. So last night you shared some exciting news about the motion picture industry. Are you allowed to talk about that publicly yet?
Not yet. I can talk about Indian Horse.
You only told the restaurant. You talked about it last night. Come on,
I can talk about Indian Horse is a movie. It's in development. The script has been written. They're looking for directors, and it should be by the time, if they follow the timeline that they're looking at right now, they're thinking about the early part of 2016 for a theatrical release for Indian Horse, the movie.
Nice. Okay, thank you. I want to talk right now as a fellow writer. So what's your process? Do you write in silence? We talked a little bit about this last night. Do you write in silence? Do you edit to music? How does it work for you?
Well, let me start at the beginning.
Okay.
There's this thing called the land. And when I have an idea, I take that idea and I take it to the land and I walk. My agent says I'm percolating. When he can't get a hold of me for days or weeks, he knows where I am. I'm out there walking. And I'm considering that idea and I'm percolating. And when the story starts to form in my mind, I continue to walk. And I tell myself the story out loud. And I tell myself the story until I have it from front to back, the whole narrative arc. I hear myself tell it out loud, and then I go home and I start to work it out on the keyboard. And so in order to do that, I need to hear what I heard when I was speaking out in the land, so I don't listen to music when I'm writing creatively. I can listen to music when I'm writing journalism or something that's a contract piece of writing. I can listen to music, but primarily it's classical. And when I'm editing, the classical gets very, very definitive, like Mahler's Sixth. Slash, 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 crash, boom, bang, and just kill your children.
Okay. So you were saying last night, Richard, that also the computer that you write on is in no way connected to the internet, that this is your altar, this is where you create. Did you learn the hard way that if you were connected that you were online and tweeting and everything else, or how did you get this distance? Because you're a stronger man than me. I'm connected and I'm plugged in as I'm writing.
I saw the effect that it was having on me when I wasn't writing. When I was working on research, when I was trying to develop ideas, when I was writing letters and emails, I saw how easy it was to tweet, or how easy it was to dash off something on Facebook, or to check to see what my cousin was doing, or whatever, and I realized how much that took me away from the focus of the work that I was doing, And so I just decided that when I was writing a book and when I was working on a novel, I wasn't going to have a computer while I was doing that work that was connected to the internet, because I know myself too well. And I know that if it was there, and there's the potential to just go, let's just look just really quickly.
Yeah.
And I'd click on Facebook, and then I would be distracted. And so I don't allow myself to do that because I want to focus on that vision, not anything else. So yeah, I just decided that I wasn't going to allow myself to have a machine that was connected to the internet while I'm working.
Wow. Okay, well, you're a strong man. You're a strong man. What I want to do is actually I want to open it up to the floor, some questions for Mr. Wagamese, and then we're going to ask him to read from his new book, Medicine Walk, if that's okay. So, this is your chance, Edmonton. We have a microphone over here. I think this might be our only microphone. So does anybody have questions for Mr. Wagamese? And if you do go up, can you please say your name and where you're from? That'd be fantastic. Look at that. Shocked. They're stunned. Here we go. We got one brave soul. Round of applause. Brave soul. Hoka. Come on up. Come on up.
Timothy Henderson, Northwest Territories.
Hi, Timothy.
Hello. Out of all of your work, what makes you the most nostalgic? I mean, or which makes you the most nostalgic, and why? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, that's an interesting question. It's the first time in all these years I've been asked that. And I would say that it's For Joshua, the first memoir I wrote. And there's a specific reason for that. Because I wrote that book as a sign to my son that I was still there and I was still willing to try to be a presence in his life by showing him the places where I fell down and how I got back up. And I'm nostalgic for it because the story is not complete. Because that was written in 2002 before I found out that I carried post-traumatic stress disorder. The book came out in 2002. I got diagnosed with PTSD in 2003. So a lot of the observations in For Joshua aren't fully fleshed because I didn't have that diagnosis. I was still operating under the illusion that most of my mistakes came from the influence of alcohol. But I found out through the diagnosis and through work with my therapist that while I was working on that issue, I was ignoring the major one, and the major one was PTSD. So I'm often drawn to thinking about revisiting that whole story now with the context of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think that that book is actually going to happen.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is George. I'm a student at MacEwan, and our professor, Dr. Anna Ford, is we're studying Indian horse with her. I have a question more about what you said in your introduction. You had mentioned it's about the number 13. You talked about the story was originally going to be about your thoughts around Tretiak and a 13 puck shootout. And then in your talk, the first reading you had about the fish is chapter 13. I just wonder if there's any connection to that number. Is there anything magical about it, or is it just coincidental?
Wow.
Not directly, but it's interesting the way that that actually evolved, because in that 1972 Summit Series, of all of the numbers that were chosen for jerseys on Team Canada, nobody picked 13. So I gave 13 to Saul in the original version of the novel. And so when Tretiak, he was sitting in the stands watching Team Canada practice, crying the blues because he wasn't going to get a chance to skate with them. And Tretiak saw the number on the back of his jersey, and that's why they challenged each other to a 13 puck shootout based on the number of his jersey. It could have been a lot longer novel if he'd wore 32. But he wore 13, so they had this magic realist shootout with the number 13. There's 13 principal teachings in the number of poles in a teepee that point toward principles that guide a good life. And that particular section in Indian Horse about the fish falls with 13 because that's about principles. It's about what they lost. They lost that whole structure They lost the whole thing that held their life and their tradition up, and so it was there for a reason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great question. Oh, wow. I love it. I love the side questions. Sometimes they're the sidewinders that just T-bone you emotionally. I love it. Hi.
I'm Paul Brecht from Edmonton,
Hi, Paul.
and I'm curious to know if hockey was part of the redemption of Richard Wagamese as it was for Saul Indian Horse.
Not as much as baseball. Hockey was always a part of who I was growing up, and as an adult, I played at different levels. I topped out at Senior A, and I played right up until I was 40. I did really find the joy in the abandon and the glee that Saul found in it, but it wasn't nearly as much of a redemptive process as baseball was and is and will probably continue to be. And I would say more about that, but then I would have to talk about the novel that's going to be about that. And yeah, so you just have to wait for the complete answer.
Thank you very much. Great question. Hey.
Hello, I'm Kelsey Norbert from
Hi,
Peace
Kelsey.
River. I'm actually a first-year journalism student myself, so I hope to be following in your guys' footsteps. But I got a question about like harnessing like the creativity. Like, how do you come up with something like I don't know, like something like Indian Horse? It's quite a awesome book. I never heard about you before I came here actually, so it's kind of nice just your perspective as like a journalist who went into creative writing. Like, I'm really bad at that kind of thing, so.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's an important one for writers. And if there's aspiring writers in the gathering tonight, it's about opening yourself to the immense potential that exists in the power of words and in the power of language. It's recognizing that that energy transcends any mental and rational energy that you bring into the process. And it's about just going like this and opening yourself up entirely to immense possibility and allowing yourself to just drink in whatever influence comes out of the ether or comes out of a dog bowl or a moose nose or whatever it is that attracts your attention, because within that is always the germ of a story that maybe didn't occur to you before. And so I think that the creative process is reliant on mystery. And oftentimes I can't give you a succinct answer to why I came up with a certain idea for a certain book, because there was a kernel of mystery in that process. And I don't actually want to solve that for myself, because if I solve it, I rob myself of the influence of that mystery. And if I rob myself of the influence of that mystery, I might dry up. So I want to leave myself wide open to that mystery, that cosmic puzzle that's in everything.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hey. Mr. Jordan Carpenter, ladies and gentlemen, a great writer and a dear friend. I owe this man a lot of money. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'll collect Thursday. I was just wondering, when you were first writing, what kept you going? Considering the amount of resources that you have now, the amount of wisdom that you have compared to what you had when you first started writing, what kept you going? I guess, in essence, what advice do you have to new writers that want to be one day in your position, really?
Wow. Well, when I started to write fiction, and I'll just stay with fiction, I really wanted to know, after all of the thousands of novels that I had read before that happened for me, I just wanted to know if I could do what Faulkner did, or what Charlotte Bronte did, or Eudora Welty, or Michael Ondaatje, or all of those people. I wanted to know if I could do that. And it just bothered the dickens out of me, whether I could do that, until I finally just tried it. And so when I started to do that, what kept me going more than anything was the vision of a native kid who was just like me at one time, who had absolutely no idea of where he came from, what his language and his culture and his history and his philosophy and his worldview and cosmology, all of that stuff. Had no idea about that, but maybe came to a book one day and opened it and fell into the realm of that story and found little pieces of himself in that process. Somebody just like me, and I started to write because I was that guy. And I found writers before me, James Welch and Darcy Nichol, and all of these people who'd written Maria Campbell, and all of these people who'd written long before me, that within the framework of their stories offered pieces of myself to me when I was inhabiting those texts. And so I would often think about someone who was just like me, who maybe needed the story that I was working on to fill up their insides, like my insides got filled up with those previous works.
Thank you.
If there's advice to any writer, and I'd ask my brother here to answer this question too, for me, it's be omnivorous. Don't just read one kind of book, read everything. Don't just watch one kind of movie, watch everything. Don't just listen to one kind of music, listen to everything. Don't just look at one kind of photograph, look at the whole realm of photography. Open yourself up to the widest possible conglomeration of influences that you possibly can, because there's going to come a point sometime in a story when you're going to need all of that influence to answer a specific question in the context of the story that you're writing. And if you deprive yourself of all of those influences, you're going to short shrift your own story and you're going to lose people. So just open yourself up to everything, because this world is filled with stories. Everything that you see, every photograph, every dance, every song, every rap, everything it's built on story. And if you open yourself up to that immense possibility of story, you're going to be a way better writer. More better. Gooder.
Thanks, Jordan. Good question. Oh. Okay, our last question of the evening. Oh, we have two more questions, and then we're going to get Mr. Wagamese to read from Medicine Walk. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Julie.
Hi, Julie.
I'm from St. Albert. A couple weeks ago, I took my girlfriend to see Joseph Boyden, and she was so excited. She says, I'm always going to go and see authors that I love. And she's actually not able to come tonight because she's coming home from Churchill, Manitoba, spending a week with the polar bears. So this question's for her, for BJ. When are you coming back?
I will come back as soon as I have an invitation to come back. I'll be here at the drop of a hat, because a lot of my spirit is in Alberta. I was in Alberta for a long, long time as a journalist and as a broadcaster, and a lot of me still resides here. I went for a walk last night. I wasn't able to sleep, so I went for a walk and I looked around parts of Edmonton that I hadn't seen for years and saw the changes and reflected on my life when I was here more than 20 years ago, and kind of reconnected to all of that and realized how much experience, my life experience, has actually been on these streets and in this whole province over the, 25, 30 years prior.
St. Albert Star Readers Festival always asks for suggestions of authors to come, and I always write your name down. I keep hoping that they're going to invite you, because I want you to come to St. Albert.
Keep writing that name down.
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Final question.
Hi, my name is Andrea, and I'm from Kenora, Ontario.
Woohoo!
I actually have, I think, a really different question. I'm curious to know if your yoga and meditation practice, I guess, or how it impacts like your creative process beyond, like I heard what you said about just walking and being with the land, and I'm curious to know if you have like a consistent practice like on the mat or meditation otherwise that you feel really supports the beautiful works that you create.
Good question. One that I'm not often asked. I've been at the process of yoga for about 16 months, and I thought I was in good shape because I was able to run 8 miles at the drop of a hat, and just drop everything and go for a run and run 8 miles and not worry about it. And I thought I was fit. I thought that my body was in really, really good shape and that I was fine. But when I went to my first yoga class and I was doing those preliminary stretches, I realized then how very little flexibility I had. And since I've been doing it, my flexibility has increased. I maintain my posture and my stance as a runner far longer than I did before. But more importantly than that, and more directly in answer to your question, it's in the breathing. It's in the breathing where I find a quality of meditation that's deeper and more profound than what I've been able to find on my own. There's a peace and there's a quietness within that process that I've been waiting for all my life. And I think that we are drawn to the things that we are drawn to when we need them most. And there was a lot of things going on in my life there for a while. And I was kind of getting into the little maelstrom about the fact that I was going to be 59, man. And I thought, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to degenerate from now on. I'm going to be like this. And I'm not going to be able to do anything. So I was in that fear state of getting older. But by being able to inhabit my body through the process of yoga, I was starting to realize that I didn't have to fall into decrepitude, that I could grow older with grace and not have to suffer a whole lot of arthritic pain, a whole lot of muscular pain, a whole lot of everything. So within that realm of yoga, I changed my diet, I changed the way that I rested, I changed the way that I put things, the fuel I put into my body. And I went from 217 pounds to my current weight of 186 in about 18 months. And I went from a size 37, 38 waist to the 33s that I'm wearing now. And I feel more dynamic, I feel more energized, I feel more peaceful in the same process. So yoga is informing my sense of myself in my physicality, but it's also informing my sense of myself at my emotional level, at my spiritual level. And so when I turn to the act of writing, I bring that same sense of holism into the process of writing. Because, I don't know if you noticed, but Medicine Walk is a big leap forward in terms of story structure, in terms of language, in terms of sentence structure, in terms of character development than anything that I've ever written before. And it has to do a lot with that influence.
Wow, great question, thank you. Okay, Richard, can I please ask you to read from Medicine Walk? And thank you for your questions, everybody.
Thank you for those questions. Medicine Walk is a novel about displaced fathers and about displaced sons. And it swings on the question of whether the reclamation of a personal history is a triumph or a sorrow or both. It's about a young boy named Franklin Starlight who, for the first 16 years of his life, grows up without the presence of his father in his life except for fleeting instances of drunken tomfoolery and sadness. And he has no idea of the nature of the person whom he calls father. And he doesn't know what to make of that relationship. So consequently, he doesn't know what to make of himself in the context of son, because the absence of the father robs him of that ability to see himself. So his father asks him one day to take him out 40 miles into the backcountry and bury him in a traditional Ojibwe manner that they used to bury warriors, being seated facing the east with all of their accoutrement around them. And for some reason, he decides that he's going to do that. And they embark upon this journey. And it's called Medicine Walk because in the context of Aboriginal people, a medicine walk is a journey that you take to gather all of the things that you will need to strengthen you for the rest of the journey. And in the context of the story, that's what they do, because the father tells the son the stories of his journey, and his son tells his father about the effects of his own journey. And so they come to a semblance of a relationship that they didn't have before. And they have a reconciliation. And this caught me right by surprise. So pardon me while I just kind of thumb through here and find the place where I really wanted to read, because there's a point in this story when you actually really get an idea of how that sense of healing actually takes over. And for the life of me, I don't have the page at the top of my head, but I'll find it. Because you see, there's, I know for myself because my two sons grew up without my influence in their life. So Medicine Walk became a way of trying to frame that for myself. So I had an understanding of what it was that my boys went through without my presence in their life. It gave me the opportunity to visit that and ask myself those questions. And it also gave me the opportunity to wonder what it was like for my sons and to kind of find a resolution for myself. See, some people tell you in writing courses and programs to write what you know. That's the big thing. They say, write what you know. And a lot of people follow that. But it's come to me over the course of the last few books that if I write what I don't know, then the process of me discovering the answers to what I don't know makes the journey of following the story in the book stronger for the reader, because we both get to find the answer together. And in Medicine Walk, that is true in spades. So the father dies. The son buries him in the manner to which he asked. But there's a point in it where you wonder, how much did it really affect him? So his father dies. And this is one short section from Medicine Walk when you get the idea of what it was, how that life and the loss of that life impacted him despite all those years of absence. The kid heard him leave in the darkness. There was a huff of breath, a short jolt, and then quiet. He lay there awake and looked out at the night and felt the stillness. It was heavy as a thick blanket, and in the depth of that quiet he was afraid to move, afraid to break it, of sacrilege, of piercing something that settled over him seamlessly, attached him to his dead father who lay in silhouette against the glint of the moon. After a while he rose and fumbled about for a stick of wood and pitched it sideways into the fire. It sent embers arcing high into the night, and he watched them climb and peak and fall. Then he pitched another, and the flames licked at the bark and slowly erupted into flame, all blue and yellow and on into orange as it caught and held and ate away at the chill and the dark around him. In the wavering light, his father appeared to breathe, and the kid caught his own breath, but there was only stillness. After a time, he reached out a hand and traced his father's face with his fingertips, like memorizing it with his skin. He followed the scarp of bone over the eyes and onto the broad plane of his forehead and stopped at the bramble of hair. Then he took 2 fingers of the other hand and traced his own face at the same time. With his eyes closed, he could feel the plummet from the brow to the nose and the long slide to the dip down to the mouth, full and plump and broad. Then the hollow at the top of the chin. He followed the square nub of it to the cascade of skin at the throat, to the poke of Adam's apple, and into the basin of the clavicle. Shh, hush, he said for no reason he could think of, and gently closed his father's eyes. He put a hand against his father's chest and held it there a long time, and only when he felt the air change and the shadow ease and the first pale aquamarine of morning did he raise it and let it settle against his own chest. Then he stood, looking down at his father, quiet. He took 2 fingers and knelt and laid them against his father's lips again. Shh, he said, hush, like a benediction.
Thank you so much. What a treat to have you here, Richard Wagamese, with us, and Richard Van Camp to share the stage with our invited guest. And we're just delighted to have you here and to celebrate your novel as the MacEwan Book of the Year, and also to get a chance to hear from Medicine Walk. I wanted to thank everybody for coming and to remind you that we have both Richards available to sign books and to invite you back for the next offering from the MacEwan Book of the Year, which is The Sisters Brothers. We'll have Patrick DeWitt here in the spring. And so again, a large thank you to you and to the members of the MacEwan Book of the Year Committee, to CAFE, the Center for the Advancement of Faculty Excellence, and of course to MacEwan University. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful night. Please join me in thanking both of our guests tonight.